So good to be here. Let me this. Okay. My name is Kathy. I am a compulsive overeater, and I am abstinent today on the gray sheet. And I weigh and measure 3 meals a day from the gray sheet without exception. I commit them to my sponsor. I don't eat no matter what, and abstinence is the most important thing in my life without exception. And I am here today to build my defense against the first bite. And this meeting today, being asked to qualify today, is really a gift from my higher power. When Laura asked me to speak, she had no idea that today's my anniversary. And so what a coincidence, what a coincidence. And I'm sitting here holding a coin, and I'll just hold it up because I don't know if anybody's ever seen it, but it's 40 years. And all I can say is one day, literally one day, one meal, one moment at a time. And I was thinking about how I go to Abstinent in Cambridge, and there were a lot of people, and then a lot of people, myself included, moved away. And then probably about 25 or 30 years later, I ran into someone at a meeting that did not have meetings at that time and didn't have too many. And it was at a small meeting in an unlikely area. And this gray sheeter, this person walked in, and she was coming back after about 25 years. And she looked at me and she said, you're still abstinent? I've never said a word. And I said, believe me, no one is more surprised than me that I'm still here. I would not have bet the farm on me. So living proof, you don't even have to want it. You just have to do it. And all I can say was I was doing it because I got some relief. And that's what I desperately wanted, was some relief. And excuse me. And when I first came in, I had all kinds of questions and doubts, and why this, why that, and I wasn't going to do this and I wasn't going to do that. I thought everybody was a bunch of drama queens. They talked about having a disease, and I thought, I don't have a disease. I just need to lose weight. And they talked about no matter what, without exception. And that made me kind of feel like I had a noose around my neck, because there was no wiggle room. And I loved wiggle room. No matter what diet I was on, I could always start again tomorrow. That was the big lie, start tomorrow. Even though I hadn't been able to start again tomorrow for 2 years, I had not been able to get through one day for 2 years, but I still believed it, that I could. And the way I found Gray Sheet, I was hired, I was starting a new job, and a month after me, a Gray Sheeter was hired. And it didn't take her long to spot me. And she gave me the gray sheet and she said, go to a meeting. The meetings are in Cambridge. And I was working about 10 minutes away from Harvard Square. And I said, okay. And when I look back on it, what a profound moment. That was like the first step of a surrender, because I was doing nothing by myself at that point. I couldn't even buy the Sunday paper, even though I enjoyed reading it, because it was like, well, you had to buy it. And then what do you do with it after you read it? I mean, I was like so non-functional at that point. So, but I said, okay. And I got on the train and I went across the river instead of going the other direction in Boston. And I started going to meetings, and I got hope at that meeting, even though I didn't know it. I didn't have the lingo, and I was certainly not about to do it the way everybody was doing it. I know I got hope because I went back the next day, and I kept going back and going back. There were a lot of face-to-face meetings in Cambridge at that time. And I had, like I said, all my exceptions of what I wasn't going to do. And someone came up to me one time after a meeting or at the meeting, and she said, look, you're either going to get abstinent or you're going to stop coming to these meetings. And I thought, oh my God, I could not imagine really doing this the 100% the Cambridge way, because there was no wiggle room, and you absolutely had to stand up for yourself. I was a great people pleaser. I didn't want anybody to be uncomfortable. I didn't want to cause any stir or anybody to be upset with me. And so if I was out somewhere and somebody said, oh, don't pull out that cup and scale, I would be like, oh, okay. But so this meant I had to pull out my cup and scale, even how uncomfortable I was. And I forget where I was going with that, but anyway, or you're going to stop coming to the meetings. And I could not imagine stopping the meetings, because even though I was not abstinent, I was eating mostly abstinent food and going to a lot of Cambridge meetings. I had a sponsor in the regular OA. They would sponsor a gray sheet then. And I had enough relief to know that if I stopped coming to these meetings, I was just going to fall off the face of the earth. And so one day after finding myself eating out of the garbage one night, it scared me to death. And I don't know if I'd ever heard of that before. I may have, I don't remember, but it hit me like a ton of bricks that this is a disease. You got it, Kathy, you have it. And you cannot do this by yourself. You have the gray sheet, you go to meetings, you have a sponsor in regular OA, but you don't want to join the Cambridge community. And that time you could go to regular meetings. You could go to meetings in Medford, which sponsored gray sheet with exception. And I tried that once or twice. But the Cambridge meetings were electric. It was the no matter what, without exception. And people talked about a disease, and this no matter what, without exception, that's what breaks the back of addiction. And it was a really hard concept for me to swallow that I wasn't at it. But I finally got it through enough pain and demoralization. The way I was living was embarrassing. And I remember when I was about 2 weeks abstinent, my roommate, of course, my roommate was a Coke dealer. And she had a lot of friends who were, into that world. And one time they came over to our apartment and I was sitting at the table. I was studying something. I was taking a course and I hear them say, "Is your roommate cool?" And I'm like, "Oh, please say she's cool." And they were like, "Yes, she's cool." And all I can say was, they were shooting up homemade morphine because one of them was a pharmacist. And my roommate, for some reason, she respected my abstinence, even though she was the one who turned me on to vomiting and turned me on to Coke. One day when she came home from work, she said to me, "You must have been really tired last night because when you came home from the grocery store, you didn't put away all your vegetables." So somehow she got it, even though she was active in, her thing. But she would have been after me to join the circle of, shooting up this homemade morphine, but she didn't because she knew I was abstinent. And so all I can say, that was a near miss for me, just a huge near miss. And I thank God every day. But really the big thing for me was food. I just could not stop. And, we would say, if the food is still working, there's no reason to be here. If anything else works for you, there's no reason to be here. If nothing else is working back to back, long term, day after day, then there's a solution here. And it's huge. Last house on the block, it's a mansion. And I remember being on the fence for so long. And I think, the best thing to do is just fall off the fence and just land. I said this today, land in the garden of abstinence, because the food is abundant. The freedom is hard to imagine. And the food is delicious. I could not do it by myself. So what did I learn here? How do I stay abstinent? We can get abstinent, weigh and measure meal abstinent. Right? How do I get to the next meal? How do I do that? How do I stay abstinent? The biggest thing for me, first of all, doing a gray sheet as it's written, because it eliminates foods that set up a craving for more of the same, and a craving that is irresistible and unsatiable. So the food plan. And then meetings. I was going to a lot of meetings, and it finally kind of sunk in, the disease I have and the message that I have. And it sunk in that I cannot do it by myself. It was always, I can do this. Well, no, I couldn't do it. So meetings. And people used to say, if you stay in the shower long enough, you'll get wet. So just keep coming to meetings. Even if you're constantly counting day ones and you feel bad about yourself, just keep coming to the meetings. And get a sponsor. That was like the last gag for me. Oh my God, getting a sponsor. I couldn't imagine that I was going to call somebody every day at the same time. That to me was like, well, I'm much too busy. I mean, I was only busy eating. I couldn't take a break from eating to go call somebody. And you had to call exactly on time. This was pre-cell phone, pre-machines and all of that jazz. And I used to sit in my kitchen and watch the second hand of the clock go up to 12 until I called, because if you were late, you might be no longer have a sponsor. And, at first it seemed rude, but I realized people, first of all, people have a life and they're trying to stay abstinent themselves so that, they're working, they have other sponsees, they have to shop and go to meetings too. And they're sitting, and because we didn't have cell phones or whatever, I realized when I became a sponsor that I was sitting by the phone waiting for 8 o'clock or 8:30 or whatever for that person to call. So I realized how important it is to call on time. It's a surrender. It's an act of respect. It's a surrender. It's a surrender. So many surrenders. It's all about surrender, little surrenders every moment, every day. The other thing I learned was in your first year, don't worry about the steps. Because, in the other program, I always, we're like, get spiritual and you'll stop eating and you won't have the cravings. And that never worked because I have this, I have this addiction to these foods. So I couldn't get rid of the cravings until I stopped eating. Sounds counterintuitive, but that's how it works. So don't pick up the first bite. It's the first bite that gets you. And somehow that made it manageable because I always thought it in terms of bags and boxes. And if I opened a box, it was gone. And so to not take that first bite, that somehow brought it down to one, and I could not eat one. And the thoughts used to always come like, eat. And as soon as I would eat, I would hand to mouth. And Sally, who started the program, used to say, it's a hand to mouth disease. If I don't put my hand to my mouth, I'm not going to eat. And so after coming to enough meetings, when I would have the thought, I want to eat, then it would come in, don't eat. And then I would have a moment, just a pause, just a moment to think about it. Think it through. How am I going to feel after I've eaten? How am I going to feel 10 minutes later, an hour later? I'm going to feel worse. Guaranteed. I'm going to feel worse. So in that moment, I have a choice. I can either go toward abstinence or go toward eating. If I pick up the food, I don't know when I'll ever have another choice. But if I stay abstinent in that moment, I start to develop abstinent muscle and it gets stronger and the cravings become less intense and they come less often. And, we were told, do anything, go out for a walk, take a shower, jump up and down, whatever. And I thought, well, I'm at work. I can't stop jumping up and down in the middle of staff meeting because there was all kinds of food around at the staff meetings. And so I started to blink with intention. Don't eat. I want that. Don't eat. Blink. Don't eat. No matter what. And what other people think of me is none of my business. That was a new twist on don't worry what other people think about you. I couldn't not worry what other people were thinking about me. But what they think about me is not my business. That somehow turned it around for me. And it was like, okay. And when I go into a restaurant, just keep my eyes down, break up my cup and scale, weigh and measure my food and put it away. And then it's done. And if I weigh and measure my food without exception, I go into the restaurant and come out of the restaurant the same person because food changes my personality. I know that. And I know we have about 1 minute left. So, minute and a half. Anyway, the thing is, it's just so worth it. And I'll tell you the hardest part about getting abstinent, about joining a community, or even about what am I going to do right now is making the decision. The decision is the hardest part. Once I make the decision, all I have to do is make a commitment to that decision and then stick with the decision, take the action. And I remember early days being in a grocery store and I was shopping my abstinent food and I thought I better buy some junk food because I know that.
1 minute, Kathy, 1 minute.
Thank you, Nancy. I know that urge to eat is going to hit sometime and I'm going to feel like I'm going to die. So I better have something in the house. And then I thought I better not, because if I do, it's going to call to me. So don't have it in the house and then I won't eat it. So I thought, okay, make the decision now. Don't eat, don't buy. And I pushed the cart. And as soon as I pushed the cart and took a step away, that craving, that obsession was gone. It was lifted. And I really learned, just make the decision, stick to that decision, and then take the action. Whatever it is, push the grocery cart, don't eat, and weigh and measure without exception. And so if you're struggling, just let yourself fall off the fence. And it's an easier fall, it's a high bounce, and you just really do it for one meal. If I do it for one meal, the next meal will take care of itself. So thank you, everybody, no matter what.